Hello, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever in the world you are. Welcome to this program. Today, we have just had confirmation of the recent by-elections that took place on Saturday, the 3rd of February. And Zanu PF has won most of those by-election seats. And now the party has more than 2/3 majority in parliament. The tragedy here is CCC were warned that they should not participate in the 2023 election without reforms because Zanu PF will rig the elections. Chamisa insisted that CCC was going to win big because, among other things, he had plugged all the Zanu PF vote rigging loopholes. You have to be incredibly naive to believe that lie. Zimbabwe did not even have a verified voters roll. Zanu PF operatives were operating particularly in the rural areas, frog marching the voters to attend Zanu PF rallies and boasting of how they were going to frog march the voters to vote for Zanu PF. Therefore, for anyone to then turn around and say, I've plugged all the vote rigging loopholes, was utter nonsense. But alas, many people believed it. And they participated in those flawed elections, which SADC election observers, AU election observers, and Zimbabwe's own Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission election observers have all condemned as flawed. That did not stop those CCC guys who had won the few craved seats, claiming those seats. And thus endorsing that the process, regardless of all the flaws, was at least acceptable to the Zimbabwe's main opposition party, CCC. In other words, they defied SADC and the AU to give Zanu PF political legitimacy. The winning candidates could not wait to claim their craved seats. Their justification, their excuse for doing this was that we have stopped Zanu PF getting 2/3 majority. That is what their spin doctors said. But within weeks, the infighting within CCC started in earnest with the recall of some of those winning candidates by Sengezo Tshabangu. He claimed he was CCC's Secretary General. Nelson Chamisa and others have disputed that. But when the case was taken to court, they could not prove it because they failed to produce a constitution with a structure and elected officials. Nelson Chamisa's position himself was he was the president of CCC, but there was no formal Congress that actually elected him. And Tshabangu claimed that he was the Secretary General by the same process. And so the courts ruled in favor of Tshabangu. So that followed the first wave of by-elections from those who had been recalled. Zanu PF won some of those seats, and the winning candidates who had contested those by-elections lost their seats because Tshabangu challenged their submission of their nomination as CCC candidates. And no sooner was the first batch done, the by-election, the first batch was 9th December 2023. Tshabangu recalled more CCC winning candidates, and hence another by-election which was held on the 3rd of February. And throughout these two by-elections, a number of those seats, Zanu PF was to win them, because either CCC fielded a candidate, one of them as independent, belonging to the Chamisa faction, and the other one as CCC belonging to the Tshabangu faction, and that divided the vote. And so Zanu PF claimed those seats. On the 24th of January, Nelson Chamisa resigned from CCC completely and said it had nothing to do with it anymore. This was to throw the cats among the pigeons, because the factional war, the lines had been drawn. No one could really remain neutral in that situation. They had to pick side. Either they went with Chamisa or with Tshabangu. And many have since resigned. So there is going to be more by-elections. And as I said, Zanu PF has already got the 2/3 majority. And so when those by-elections are held, no doubt Zanu PF will win a few more seats so that they end up with a super majority in parliament. And so we come back to this argument by CCC spin doctors that the party had participated and had achieved a lot by stopping Zanu PF getting 2/3 majority. But because of the infighting, the dog-eat-dog infighting within CCC, now we are ending up with Zanu PF getting a super majority. The argument that it was in the people's interest that Zanu PF participated, CCC participated, it's just been nullified. Zimbabwe's political situation now is more uncertain than ever before. How are we going to get out of the present situation? That is a serious question that every thinking Zimbabwean out there needs to ask themselves. The dog-eat-dog infighting in CCC means that CCC for the next 4 years will be fighting among themselves, and we can be certain of one thing: no meaningful reform will be implemented. And come the 2028 elections, whoever of the CCC members are still standing will participate in those elections. And no doubt they'll be telling people, this time we are going to win. And by participating, they will once again give ZANU PF legitimacy. And so this nightmare continues. This is something that Zimbabweans themselves should wake up. The infighting within CCC is not going to help the people's cause to end the ZANU PF dictatorship. Zimbabwe is a failed state. Millions of our people are living in abject poverty. Millions more have left the country as economic and/or political refugees. This situation cannot go on. The prospects of ZANU PF rigging the 2028 election is real. And it's almost a given now, given the chaotic situation in the opposition. This is when it is disappointing, to say the least, when you hear people talking of Chamisa is the best foot forward for Zimbabwe. Clearly shows that some people really have failed to understand what is going on. Let me explain it again. The whole armed struggle, the fight for independence, was so that all Zimbabweans can enjoy freedom, justice, liberty, and have a meaningful say in the governance of the country. As ZANU PF got nearer independence, the party realized that it cannot hang on to power if the people exercise their right to a meaningful vote. So from the word go, ZANU PF realized that it really needed to take away the people's right to a meaningful vote. Zimbabwe has never held free, fair, and credible elections. The 1980 elections were not free, fair, and credible. ZANU PF made it very clear that if the party does not win those elections, the Bush war would continue. Of course, the people voted to end the Bush war. And as soon as ZANU PF got their feet under the desk, they started consolidating power. Within 3 years, the country was witnessing the Gukurahundi massacre. The primary purpose of the Gukurahundi massacre was to force PF ZAPU to give up its claim to being an independent party, because PF ZAPU was the main challenge to ZANU PF swallowed power. The Gukurahundi War continued until 1987, when the late Dr. Joshua Nkomo and his ZAPU colleagues threw in the towel and signed the Unity Accord, dissolving themselves and joining ZANU PF. Mugabe seized on that to launch a de facto one-party state in Zimbabwe. From there on, he justified a de facto one-party state on the grounds that a multi-party system was disturbing the unity accord that had been achieved in 1987. All it meant is, of course, ZANU PF will have absolute power. By the late 1990s, the people of Zimbabwe realized that the only way they are going to stop ZANU PF rigging the elections and staying in power was if there were democratic reforms. And hence the call for democratic change. Morgan Tsvangirai launched his party MDC in 1999 on the wave of the popular demand for democratic change. And they called their party Movement for Democratic Change. And the people have risked life and limb and livelihoods since 1999 to elect MDC CCC leaders into power on the understanding they will implement the reforms necessary to ensure free, fair, and credible elections. That was the basis. Alas, MDC guys got their golden opportunity to implement those reforms during the GNU of 2008 to 2009 to 2013. But Mugabe bribed them, and they failed to implement even one token reform. Not even one token reform. During the GNU itself, some people would ask, why is MDC failing to implement reforms? And ZANU PF cronies will boast that Mazvano MDC adzidza kuchika anyerere. They will never rock the boat. They are enjoying the benefits of being on the gravy train. Post-GNU, MDC leaders have participated in elections, knowing fully well that the election process was flawed, and that participating will only give ZANU PF legitimacy. Still, they persisted, because they also knew that ZANU PF was offering a few grave train seats to entice the opposition to participate. ZANU PF needed to portray the country as a healthy, functioning, multi-party system. It knew after the 2008 elections that it can no longer push this agenda of a de facto one-party state. So the primary purpose, the last 23 years of the opposition, was that the opposition would implement the democratic changes necessary to stop ZANU PF rigging elections. And yet, as I stated already, they've been participating in these flawed elections, knowing fully well that ZANU PF will rig them out of greed. The failure by many Zimbabweans out there to realize that MDC's primary purpose was to implement reforms. And secondly, that they had the golden opportunity to do so during the GNU and failed to do so, to implement even one reform, is at the heart of why Zimbabwe has failed to stop ZANU PF rigging the elections all these last 43 years. And so to hear somebody say Chamisa is the best foot forward for the country clearly shows that they have not understood what the reforms were. They've not understood what the GNU was all about. They've not understood that MDC leaders sold out big time by failing to implement even one reform. Sold out big time by participating in flawed elections, even when they've been told they're flawed. I believe that in 2023, when SADC election observers and the AU election observers came out and condemned the election process, if the opposition had not sold out, I believe SADC would have stepped in and forced ZANU PF to go into some GNU arrangement where once again the country was being asked to implement the reforms to end this case of rigged elections. But when CCC took up their seats, even when they'd been told this election process was flawed, I think that left SADC with no choice but to shrug their shoulders and say, well, what else can we do? And CCC justified their taking up their seats by claiming that by participating in these elections, they had achieved a lot. They've stopped ZANU PF getting 2/3 majority. But as we know now, within 6 months, ZANU PF has already secured this 2/3 majority anyway, and is on course to have a super majority. So we come back to why the hell did CCC participate in these elections? Why the hell did CCC fail to implement even one meaningful democratic change in 23 years, including the 5 in the GNU? And most important of all, why the hell are some people still saying these CCC MDC leaders are competent to get us out of this hell? They are not. I repeat, they are not. What the people of Zimbabwe must do now is wake up to the reality that we need to elect competent men and women who will implement the democratic reforms and stop ZANU PF rigging elections. The next election should not be taking place until we've implemented the reforms, because participating in those flawed elections will only give ZANU PF legitimacy. The people themselves have to wake up to that reality. And unless they do, unless they accept that all the leaders, particularly those who were in the GNU, are not up to scratch, this country is heading for serious trouble. ZANU PF is not going to reform itself out of office. And at the present moment, ZANU PF has got the opposition doing its dirty bidding. There can be no denying that ZANU PF has influence over the opposition. There cannot be any denying of that. ZANU PF has got very deep pockets. It has managed to corrupt all the country's institutions, public or otherwise, including the opposition. When Chamisa resigned, he complained that ZANU PF had kidnapped, hijacked CCC. There cannot be any denying that ZANU PF has got operatives or has been able to buy off opposition leaders to do the party's own bidding. There cannot be any denying of that. When you've got a party that controls every aspect of the country's economic, political life, enjoys absolute power, God knows the level of mischief it can achieve. That is what we are looking at here. Changing this dictatorship is not going to be a walk in the park. And this is the reality that we've got to face. Before I close, I'll just add a comment here from one of the listeners out there, Bernard Musoro. He says, let's hope Nara platform will assist. Well, my only comment with the Nara platform, the way it's constituted at the present moment, is that these are individuals who have already in the past called for reforms. And yet, when push comes to shove, they've participated in flawed elections without those reforms. So my personal view is that most of those people in Nara are just paying lip service to reforms while they wait for the 2028 elections. The real acid test, as far as I'm concerned, for somebody to genuinely say they are calling for electoral reforms is to clearly state that they will not participate in flawed elections without those reforms. ZANU PF knows that most of those people in Nara at the present moment will participate because they are after the few gravy train seats that ZANU PF offers. They can't resist them no more than Nelson Chamisa and company could resist those gravy train seats. So that is my personal opinion on that one. And with that, I would like to repeat that Zimbabwe is going nowhere until we implement the democratic reforms. And at the present moment, the real challenge is to accept that the present opposition has failed and to search for competent men and women who will implement those reforms. The hope that somehow Nelson Chamisa will deliver and implement the reforms when he has already failed. He had the golden opportunity, like all the other MDC leaders during the GNU, to implement the reforms, and they failed to implement even one. I think is naive. We need to grow up and accept what these guys can and cannot do, and keep on pretending that they can still implement the reforms when they fail to do so, when they had the golden opportunity to do so during the GNU, is naive, to say the least. Of course, there's ZANU PF operatives who would want to promote that the opposition will deliver. This time they will deliver. Make no mistake about it. That is part of their agenda. We need to be smart enough to say, no, they have failed to deliver. And we can't keep on pretending that they will deliver. That is the quantum leap that Zimbabweans need to make. Nelson Chamisa is not an infallible demigod that some people have elevated him to. He is a fallible mortal. Worse still, he is a mortal with a well-documented track record of being corrupt and incompetent. And to keep on pretending that he is the best foot forward after 23 years without even one token reform implemented is, like I said, naive to say the least. And this country has paid dearly for being naive. We need to snap out of it. We are an independent country. We are masters of our own destiny. And repeating the same mistake over and over again does not augur well with being master of your own destiny. Thank you very much for listening, and good night.